Evelyn Carter had always believed that love was measured by consistency, not grand gestures. At 67, she still lived in the same modest four-bedroom home in Brookfield, Ohio, where she had raised her two children after losing her husband more than 3 decades earlier. The porch swing creaked in the winter breeze, the kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh coffee, and every room carried memories that no amount of money could replace. Her mornings followed the same routine. Before sunrise, she wrapped herself in an olive jacket, walked 2 miles through quiet neighborhood streets, then returned home to brew coffee and write in a worn green ledger she'd kept for over 40 years. The ledger wasn't about wealth, it was about responsibility. Every loan, every gift, every unexpected expense she covered for someone she loved found its place on those pages. Years of working as an accountant had taught Evelyn one lesson above all else: memory fades. Paper never does. She never imagined that one ordinary Christmas would force her to open that ledger for a reason she'd never expected. 31 years earlier, her husband, Daniel Carter, had collapsed from a heart attack outside a hardware store. One moment they were planning their children's birthdays. The next she was standing beside 2 frightened children wondering how she would keep their lives together. Ryan was 9, Emma was 6. With no choice but to move forward, Evelyn accepted an entry-level bookkeeping job during the day and attended accounting classes at night. She survived on cheap coffee, secondhand textbooks, and determination. 8 exhausting years later, she earned her CPA license. Soon after, she opened Carter Financial Services in a small office squeezed between a laundromat and a pharmacy. The business slowly grew. So did her confidence. By the time she retired, she had paid off her mortgage, built respectable savings, and earned a reputation as the most trustworthy accountant in the county. She wasn't wealthy. She was secure. And she had built every piece of that security herself. Ryan often joked that his mother could stretch $1 farther than anyone he'd ever met. She laughed every time. She never told him that stretching dollars had once been the only reason they survived. When Ryan introduced Lauren Foster during his early 30s, Evelyn welcomed her with genuine warmth. Lauren was confident, charming, and ambitious. Her parents, Patricia and Charles Foster, carried themselves differently. Expensive clothes, luxury cars, perfect smiles. During the engagement dinner, Patricia complimented Evelyn's handmade table runner with a smile that somehow made the compliment sound insulting. "How creative," she'd said softly. Evelyn smiled politely. Years of dealing with difficult clients had taught her when silence carried more dignity than argument. Ryan married Lauren 6 months later. Evelyn contributed $15,000 toward the wedding without mentioning it again. 3 years later, Ryan called with another request. They had found their dream home, but were $80,000 short of the down payment. Without hesitation, Evelyn agreed. Her longtime friend, Margaret Lewis, a real estate attorney, insisted the money should be documented as a formal loan. "It protects everyone," Margaret explained. Evelyn trusted her judgment. Ryan and Lauren signed every document without complaint. No one expected those papers would ever matter. Life moved on. Grandchildren arrived. Jack first, then little Sophie. Christmas slowly migrated from Evelyn's home to Patricia's enormous lake house. At first, Evelyn understood. The children needed space. The drive was easier for everyone else. Then the invitations simply stopped coming. She continued helping anyway. Every month, she quietly paid part of Jack's private school tuition. She covered dance lessons, medical bills, unexpected repairs, holiday gifts. Whenever Ryan mentioned financial stress, she found a way to ease it before he even asked. She never wanted recognition. Seeing her family comfortable was enough. By early December one year, something felt different. Normally, Lauren organized Christmas plans weeks ahead. This time, no message came. Evelyn wrapped presents anyway, a telescope for Jack, a handcrafted dollhouse for Sophie. Both sat beneath the tree waiting for directions that never arrived. Christmas morning passed, then afternoon. Still nothing. She finally texted Ryan, "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. What time should I come?" No reply. She convinced herself he was simply busy. The house was probably full, children running everywhere, Guests arriving, hours slipped away. As darkness settled outside her windows, the wrapped presents remained by the front door exactly where she'd placed them that morning. At 7:15, she finally called her son's phone. Ryan answered after several rings. His voice sounded distracted, too loud, as though he were speaking over music and laughter. "Hey, Mom, sorry, wrong house this year." Before Evelyn could answer, the line went strangely quiet. Then came laughter. Someone nearby said something she couldn't quite understand. Ryan laughed again. Then, believing the call had already ended, he repeated words that froze the blood in her veins. "She actually thinks sending us money earns her a place at the table." The room erupted in laughter. Evelyn never spoke. She quietly lowered the phone from her ear. Then she pressed the red button. The silence inside her little kitchen suddenly felt louder than every voice she'd just heard. She looked at the Christmas gifts waiting faithfully by the door. Then she slowly walked toward her laptop. For the first time in years, she opened her banking accounts with a very different purpose. Evelyn didn't cry. The tears never came. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop while the untouched Christmas presents remained beside the front door. Outside, snow drifted gently across the porch. Inside, something far colder settled in her heart. She signed into her online banking. One by one, she reviewed every automatic payment connected to Ryan's family. The monthly tuition transfer for Jack's private school, canceled. The savings deposit she quietly made into Lauren's account every month, canceled. The automatic contribution toward their household expenses whenever unexpected bills appeared, canceled. Every transfer disappeared with a single click. She paused only once before pressing the final confirmation button, not because she doubted herself, because she realized how many years she had been carrying a family that barely noticed she was still holding them up. When the last transfer disappeared from the screen, Evelyn closed the laptop. For the first time in years, the ledger balanced in her favor. She slept only a few hours. Morning arrived with gray skies and silence. When she picked up her phone, the screen lit up with missed calls. 27. Ryan had called 14 times. Lauren had called 7. Emma had left 3 voicemails. 2 unfamiliar numbers had tried reaching her before sunrise. Several text messages followed one another without pause. "Mom, please answer. Are you okay? Call us immediately." Then the tone changed. "Mom, canceling everything wasn't necessary. You're overreacting." Evelyn read every message without responding. She brewed coffee, buttering a slice of toast, felt strangely peaceful compared to the storm exploding inside her phone. After breakfast, she pulled on her walking shoes and left for her usual morning walk. The cold air helped clear her thoughts. For years, she had believed generosity strengthened relationships. Now she wondered whether it had simply delayed difficult truths. When she returned home, Emma called again. This time Evelyn answered. "Mom," Emma said quietly. "What happened?" Evelyn told her everything. The unanswered invitation, the phone call, Ryan's careless words, the laughter. Emma remained silent for several seconds. "I've heard comments before," she admitted at last. "What kind of comments?" "Lauren. And sometimes her mother. They joked that you were old-fashioned, that you tried to buy affection by helping everyone." Evelyn closed her eyes. "So you knew." "I knew pieces," Emma whispered. "I should have told you. I kept hoping it would stop." Neither woman spoke for a while. Finally, Emma asked, "Are you really cutting them off?" "I'm stopping the financial help," Evelyn answered calmly. "I'm not stopping being their mother." There was a difference. Emma understood immediately. Before ending the call, she mentioned something unexpected. "The 2 unknown numbers this morning belonged to Patricia." Evelyn frowned. "Patricia has never called me." "I know," Emma replied. "That's why I think she's worried." After hanging up, Evelyn found herself thinking less about Ryan's words and more about Patricia's sudden interest. People rarely changed overnight, especially people like Patricia Foster. That afternoon, Evelyn carried her green ledger onto the dining room table. She turned each page slowly. Every line represented trust. Every entry represented sacrifice. Wedding contribution. $15,000, home loan, $80,000, private school tuition, $600 every month, dance classes, medical expenses, emergency repairs, holiday cash gifts, summer camps, birthday surprises. She added the totals carefully, once, then again. Finally, she reached for her calculator. The number staring back at her seemed impossible. $158,400. She leaned back in her chair, not because of the amount, because she'd never realized how quietly the total had grown over the years. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. There was a difference. Anger faded. Disappointment lingered. As evening approached, Evelyn called the only person she completely trusted with financial matters. Margaret Lewis answered immediately. "Evelyn, Merry Christmas." Or maybe not. Evelyn gave a small laugh. "I need you to look at something." "The house loan?" "Yes." Margaret became serious. "I'll pull the paperwork first thing tomorrow." The next afternoon, Margaret called back. "Evelyn." Something in her voice immediately caught Evelyn's attention. "What is it?" "The balloon payment matured over a year ago." "I know. I also discovered something else." "What?" "You've quietly renewed the agreement every year without collecting interest." Evelyn looked toward the green ledger lying open on her table. "I didn't want Ryan to struggle." Margaret sighed. "Kindness is admirable, but paperwork doesn't disappear because people stop talking about it." Silence filled the line. Finally, Margaret asked gently, "Would you like me to prepare another extension?" Evelyn looked out the kitchen window. Snowflakes drifted across the yard where Ryan used to build snowmen as a little boy. She remembered teaching him honesty, responsibility, gratitude. Somewhere along the way, those lessons had become optional. Her answer came quietly. "No." Margaret waited. No extension this time. For the first time in 6 years, the loan would finally become due. 3 days after speaking with Margaret, Evelyn finally answered Ryan's calls. He sounded relieved. "Mom, thank goodness, we've been worried sick." "Worried about me?" Evelyn asked calmly. "Or worried about the payments that disappeared?" Silence. Only for a second. But it was enough. Ryan cleared his throat. "You didn't have to cancel everything over one misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a joke." Evelyn remained calm. "I've noticed people call something a joke when they don't want to apologize for it." Ryan sighed heavily. "Mom, you're making this much bigger than it needs to be." "No, Ryan. I'm finally seeing it for exactly what it is." He tried changing the subject. "The kids don't understand why Grandma suddenly stopped helping. I haven't stopped loving my grandchildren. I stopped financing 2 adults who laughed at me." Ryan had no answer. Before ending the call, Evelyn spoke one final sentence. "I'd like you, Lauren, Patricia, and Charles at my house this Saturday morning at 10. "What for?" "You'll find out when you arrive." "And who's going to be there?" "Margaret." The line became quiet again. Ryan understood immediately. This wasn't going to be another emotional family discussion. This involved paperwork. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Evelyn woke before sunrise. Instead of cleaning because the house needed it, she cleaned because it gave her restless hands something useful to do. After breakfast, she walked to the hallway closet. Carefully, she removed a cardboard box wrapped in faded newspaper. Inside rested her late mother's blue and white china. She hadn't used it in years. Each plate carried memories of ordinary Sundays when her children were young and laughter filled the house. She washed every piece by hand. 6 cups, 6 saucers, 6 dinner plates. When everything was arranged neatly across the dining table, the room looked exactly as it had decades earlier. Only the people had changed. Margaret arrived first. She carried a leather folder beneath one arm. "You've been busy," she observed while looking around the spotless dining room. "I needed something productive to do." Margaret smiled softly. "I understand." At precisely 10 o'clock, Ryan knocked first. He hugged his mother awkwardly. She returned the hug, no matter how disappointed she felt. He was still her son. Lauren entered without speaking. Her eyes immediately found Margaret's folder resting on the table. Patricia and Charles followed moments later. Patricia wore another expensive cream-colored coat. Charles walked in confidently, as though entering one of his own business meetings. Everyone accepted coffee. No one touched it. Finally, Patricia spoke. "Evelyn, we're all concerned. Christmas became emotional for everyone." Evelyn simply nodded. "I'm glad you came." Charles leaned back comfortably. "Let's clear this up quickly." "I agree," Evelyn answered. Ryan spoke next. "Mom, if this is about what I said—" "It is." He lowered his eyes. "I shouldn't have said it." "No. You shouldn't have believed it." Lauren shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't meant the way it sounded." "Then tell me how it was meant." Nobody answered. The silence stretched across the room. Evelyn looked directly at Patricia. "I've heard those exact words before." Patricia frowned. "What words?" "She thinks money earns her a seat at the table." Recognition flashed across Patricia's face before she quickly hid it. "You said something almost identical years ago." Patricia looked away. "I don't remember." "I do," Charles interrupted impatiently. "Can we move forward?" "We're about to." Evelyn turned toward Margaret. "It's time." Margaret calmly opened her folder. She removed several documents. One copy slid toward Ryan and Lauren, another toward Patricia and Charles. Ryan frowned while reading the first page. Lauren's face slowly lost its color. "What is this?" she whispered. Margaret answered professionally. "Your home loan agreement." Charles looked confused. "What loan?" Margaret folded her hands. 6 years ago, Evelyn loaned Ryan and Lauren $80,000 for the purchase of their home. Patricia stared at her daughter. "You told us that money came from your savings." Lauren swallowed hard. Charles grabbed the paperwork. His confident expression disappeared as he reached the payment schedule. Margaret continued, "The loan matured 14 months ago." Ryan looked at his mother in complete disbelief. "You never mentioned that." "I didn't need to." "I trusted you." Margaret spoke again. "Evelyn quietly extended the agreement every year without asking for payment." Ryan slowly lowered the papers. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "You've been protecting us this entire time." Evelyn looked directly into her son's eyes. "Even after you stopped protecting me." No one spoke. The silence inside the dining room felt heavier than any argument. Then Charles finally broke it. "Fine, we'll pay it." He believed that ended the conversation. He had no idea. Margaret had one more document waiting inside her folder. Charles tossed the loan documents back onto the table with a dismissive shrug. "Fine," he said confidently. "We'll write a check. $80,000 isn't worth turning Christmas into a courtroom." Margaret didn't react. Instead, she quietly reached into the folder again. "There is one more document everyone should see." Charles frowned. "What now?" She placed another packet of papers in front of him. Unlike the first set, these weren't related to Evelyn. They carried his own name. His confidence faded the moment he read the first page. Patricia leaned closer. "What is it?" Charles didn't answer. Margaret spoke instead. "While confirming the status of Evelyn's lien, I reviewed the public property records. During that search, I discovered your lake house had been refinanced 8 months ago." Patricia looked at her husband. "You refinanced the lake house?" Charles shifted in his chair. "It was just business," Margaret continued. "The loan totaled $210,000. Ryan looked up in surprise. $210,000? Charles folded the papers quickly. "I don't see how that's anyone else's business." "It became relevant," Margaret replied calmly, "when you implied Evelyn was creating unnecessary drama over money." The room fell silent. Patricia slowly turned toward her husband. "You told me the dealership expansion was funded with company profits." Charles rubbed his forehead. The market changed. "You never said you mortgaged the lake house." "I didn't want everyone worrying." Patricia stared at him, stunned. "For months you've been criticizing Evelyn's finances while hiding your own." Charles had no answer. Lauren looked between her parents, clearly realizing that the polished image she'd admired for years wasn't nearly as perfect as she'd believed. Evelyn remained silent. She had no desire to embarrass anyone. The truth was already doing that on its own. Patricia finally spoke again, her voice much quieter than before. "Evelyn, I'm sorry." Those two words surprised everyone, especially Evelyn. Patricia looked down at the china cup in front of her. "I judged you. I assumed your simple life meant you had less to offer." She swallowed hard. "I was wrong." For the first time since they'd met nearly a decade earlier, Patricia sounded sincere. Evelyn appreciated the apology, but she also understood something important. An apology couldn't erase years of quiet disrespect. It could only acknowledge them. Ryan suddenly looked at his wife. "Lauren?" She refused to meet his eyes. He spoke again. "Did you tell your parents we saved the down payment ourselves?" Lauren hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't want them thinking we needed help." "So you let them believe Mom contributed nothing?" Lauren's silence answered the question. Ryan leaned back in disbelief. "I defended that story for years." "You never asked," Lauren whispered. Ryan looked exhausted. "No, I trusted you." Charles stood abruptly. "This meeting has gone far enough." He reached for his coat. "We'll refinance. We'll pay the loan. Let's end this." Margaret calmly slid one final sheet across the table. "The repayment deadline is 90 days. Charles glanced at the paper. "We can manage that." "I believe you can." He tucked the document under his arm without another word. Patricia remained seated. She looked around Evelyn's modest dining room, at the neatly arranged blue and white china, at the carefully polished wooden table, at the framed family photographs lining the walls. Everything suddenly looked different. Not expensive, not luxurious, simply genuine. "I spent years trying to impress people," Patricia admitted quietly. "You spent those same years building a family." Evelyn smiled sadly. "I tried," Patricia nodded, "and I helped tear that apart." Lauren finally broke down. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry for Christmas." Evelyn looked directly at her. "Are you sorry because you hurt me? Or because everything came out?" Lauren couldn't answer. That silence told Evelyn everything she needed to know. One by one, everyone stood. Ryan lingered near the doorway. "Mom," she looked at him. "I never wanted this." "I know. I just lost sight of what mattered." Evelyn nodded. "Sometimes people don't realize they're lost until someone stops leading them." Ryan lowered his head. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix 6 years in one afternoon." She walked him to the front door. Before leaving, he turned back. "I do love you. I know you do. But love isn't measured by words. It's measured by choices." Ryan stood quietly for several seconds before walking toward his truck. Evelyn watched every vehicle disappear down the street. When the last one was gone, she returned inside. The house became silent once again. Margaret remained behind. She helped clear the untouched coffee cups from the table. "You handled that better than most judges I've met," Margaret said. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to win. What were you trying to do?" She looked at the empty chair where Ryan had been sitting. "I wanted them to finally see the truth." Margaret closed the folder. "I think they did." But Evelyn wasn't so sure, because seeing the truth and changing because of it were two very different things. The 90 days passed more quickly than Evelyn expected. Winter slowly surrendered to spring. The snow melted from her front yard, flower buds appeared along the porch, and the neighborhood returned to life. She spent less time staring at her phone, more time tending her garden, more time reading, more time thinking about herself for the first time in years. Ryan called several times during those months. Their conversations were polite but different. There were no requests, no discussions about bills, no hints about financial problems. Without realizing it, they had begun speaking as mother and son instead of benefactor and recipient. On the 86th day, a certified envelope arrived. Inside was a cashier's check for $80,000. Every penny of the loan had been repaid. Attached was an official release confirming that Evelyn's lien against the house had been satisfied. There was no handwritten note, no apology, only paperwork. Oddly enough, that felt appropriate. For years, the relationship had revolved around money spoken in whispers. Now the money was finally gone. Whatever remained between them would have to stand on its own. Margaret called later that afternoon. They refinanced through another bank, she explained. They qualified on their own. Evelyn smiled. Good? You sound relieved. I am. I never wanted Ryan to lose his home. I only wanted him to understand how he got it. After ending the call, Evelyn opened her green ledger one final time. She carefully wrote a single sentence beneath the last entry. Loan repaid in full. She stared at those words for a long moment before gently closing the book. 41 years of recording sacrifices had finally come to an end. The following morning, she visited a stationery store downtown. Instead of another green ledger, she bought a plain black notebook. When she returned home, she opened the first page and wrote a new title, Things I Want. It felt strange, almost selfish, yet strangely liberating. The first entries were simple. Visit the coast of Maine in October. Replace the old porch swing. Take watercolor classes. Plant a rose garden. She smiled as she filled the page. For decades, she had carefully documented everything she gave away. She had never once written down her own dreams. Maybe it wasn't too late. A week later, Evelyn called Ryan. I have one request. Anything, Mom. I'd like to spend the second Saturday of every month with Jack and Sophie. Just us, Ryan answered immediately. I'd like that. So would they. The arrangement began the following month. Some Saturdays they visited museums. Other weekends they baked cookies, built birdhouses, or watched old movies together. Jack loved astronomy. The telescope Evelyn had bought him on that painful Christmas finally found its way into his hands. One clear evening, they stood together in the backyard. That's Jupiter, Evelyn said. Jack adjusted the telescope. I can see its moons. His excitement filled the quiet night. At that moment, Evelyn realized something. Children never cared who paid the bills. They remembered who showed up. Ryan occasionally joined them for dinner. He was quieter than before, more thoughtful. Sometimes he apologized in small ways instead of grand speeches. He fixed the loose porch railing without being asked. He shoveled snow after winter storms. He called simply to ask how her day had been. Those gestures didn't erase the past, but they showed effort. Lauren remained distant. She mailed a Christmas card that year. No handwritten message, no apology, just printed holiday wishes. Evelyn placed it on her refrigerator beside one of Jack's crayon drawings. Both belonged to her story. One represented disappointment, the other represented hope. She chose to keep both. The following Christmas, Evelyn hosted dinner in her own home for the first time in years. The blue and white china returned to the table. Emma arrived first. Margaret followed carrying homemade pie. Jack and Sophie burst through the front door laughing before wrapping their grandmother in the biggest hug she'd received all year. Ryan arrived a few minutes later. He stood quietly near the doorway. I wasn't sure if I should come. Evelyn smiled warmly. You were invited. This time, he took a seat without being asked. As everyone gathered around the table, Evelyn looked at the faces surrounding her. Some relationships were stronger, some remained fragile, but every person sitting there had chosen to be present. That mattered. As laughter filled the dining room once again, Evelyn thought back to the painful phone call that had nearly broken her. Ryan had been right about one thing. She'd been sitting at the wrong table, not because she wasn't welcome, but because she had forgotten she already owned one of her own. She'd spent years believing generosity earned belonging. Now she understood something far more important. Real love never needs to be purchased. Respect cannot be funded. And family isn't defined by who accepts your money. It's defined by who values your presence when there's nothing left to give except yourself. Evelyn lifted her teacup and smiled. This table wasn't the biggest, it wasn't the fanciest, but every place at it had been earned through honesty, kindness, and choice. And for the first time in many years, that was more than enough.